Hi, African Queen Mo family, friends, and everybody out there. How are you doing? I hope everything is fine. I hope you're having a good day, despite all the difficulties that we've been hearing about and cost of living. If you go to TikTok, that's like what's trending. Everybody's like, how does everybody survive? It's African Queen Mo with another show. How have you guys been doing? I hope everything's going okay. I am based in Cardiff, and Cardiff is in Wales, and I've been here for a while. There's somebody who asked me, how could you be African Queen Mo with a British accent? Well, because I can actually have a British accent if I want to. And if I want to have an American accent, I can have an American accent too. Because I am versatile. I can be whoever I want to be, and nobody has to restrict me. Yes, I had a very interesting upbringing, guys. I'm one of the first, I'm in my 50s now. So I'm one of those first group who were brought up after the colonial powers left the country. And during that period is when my father, who was studying for his PhD in the UK, returned to take over from the British, running the agricultural research station in Africa. So I was brought up in an environment that was really, really British, really, right from the time I was in nursery school. But that's a story for another day, and that's the reason why you hear me speak and flow very easily between accents. I can speak as a British person, I can speak as a Kenyan person, but I was brought up in Kenya, and I went to a British nursery school, that had a lot of different wonderful facilities. Honestly, if I could tell you about my childhood, it's almost the stuff of dreams. You don't really hear about these kinds of things, and a lot of children not experience what I experienced as a child. But this is the reason why those people who have not lived very long do not know the Kenya that used to be, or the Africa that used to be, or the Zimbabwe that used to be before, where streetlights were working, where we had parking meters when you parked the cars, where we had facilities like clubs. We actually had health centers that worked. They called them dispensaries. Yes, this is due to the colonial government's implementation of these kinds of facilities so that their own people could benefit, and also the workers in the community could also benefit. Unfortunately, when our presidents and our own people took over from the colonial rule, a lot of things were lost. A lot of government services that were provided for free or for very subsidized rates were lost. So that's why a lot of people actually still maintain the belief that it was better when Africa was colonized. But they also forget other things, such as the fact that Africans had a lot of restrictions in terms of even movement, in terms of being able to secure proper jobs, being able to access education, having access to their land, and being able to grow food. So, by the way, I don't really think it's right to think that way, that the colonial rule was better. But that's a story for another day. Today, I want us to discuss something very, very different, yeah? You've been seeing on TikTok, you guys, that people have been talking a lot about the economy and asking questions like, how do you survive? How are you guys surviving? How is anybody surviving in this economy? I would also like to ask the same question. How are we surviving? Other people are saying they dread going to the supermarket. I thought I was the only one who was dreading going to the supermarket. But even with high prices, I still want to go, because I just want to peep and see. Actually, seriously, they've actually increased the rates. Yeah. These guys are daring. How can they increase the prices? And now they're not even bothering putting prices anymore because of how often things are increasing. You'll notice in the supermarkets on the shelves that things are increasing all the time. So I wanted to talk about something which is a little bit touchy-feely. I hope some of you guys are not going to feel offended if I discuss this issue, because it's actually something that has been confirmed by research that has been conducted within the UK, that there is a great disparity and discrepancy between what is earned by people of color amongst the black minority ethnic, BME. There's a great discrepancy of income and great disparity between blacks, whites, Asians, Indians, Chinese in the country of the UK. And unfortunately, Africans are at the bottom of the ladder. So I wanted to talk to you about how cost of living is impacting even more greatly on black people because of the fact that there is already structural racism that has denied many black people opportunity to work and denied organizations black talent. I've heard the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. So amongst people of color, there's a lot of inventions. Like, for example, I can tell you in my own country of Kenya, there's something called the M-Pesa. Pesa is money, mobile pesa, mobile money. So with M-Pesa, you can pay your bills. You don't need a bank account. Your phone literally becomes a bank account. And as soon as you land in the country called Kenya, the first thing you do is you get a line, a telephone line, and they put in your M-Pesa account, and there you can actually put your money. You can withdraw your pounds or your pounds or your dollars or your shillings, put them into the M-Pesa account, and with that you can pay for literally everything. You can pay your taxi driver, you can pay for your meals, you can pay for any bills at the hotel. You can, so actually it cuts out the fact that you need cash. It's a cashless economy, pretty much. And that was actually an invention of Africans. It was an invention of the black people because of the fact that a lot of banks made it really difficult for people to access banks. So many people are unbanked. Yeah, there was a need to try to develop something that was going to be accessible for people at all levels of society. If that was possible here in the UK, I'm very, very sure that if we had more Africans, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, involved at all levels of society, at all, ladders, at all levels in organizations, especially at managerial levels, at decision-making levels, you would see a very different country of the UK, a very different country. And you'd see a lot of solutions to a lot of problems that we have, including medical problems, anything to do with medicine. As you know, the Chinese have their own medicine, Indians have their own medicine, Africans have their own medicine. In terms of our diets, you can already see that we're benefiting a lot in the UK from a huge diverse diet that we have right now. So apart from food, we have forgotten this other part, which is the intellect, okay? Black people and people of color have a lot to contribute, but unfortunately, the environment hasn't made it conducive for black people to do so for these reasons. Okay, and this is now where we get into the nitty-gritty of things, yeah? According to my readings, and I've been doing a lot of reading on this issue, okay, people from the black and minority ethnic communities on average, are significantly less wealthy than their white counterparts in this society. And it's just basically because of lack of opportunities. Okay, and research was actually conducted by the Prince's Trust. Nearly half of all 16 to 25-year-olds in the UK fear that they will never earn enough to support a family amid the cost of living crisis and looming recession, a youth charity report reveals. The Prince's Trust said the age group's happiness and confidence is at its lowest level since it started the research 14 years ago. And that is Monday, January 13th, 2023. That is nearly half of all black 16 to 25-year-olds fear the future. They fear that they cannot provide for a household. And you can imagine that the cost of living crisis and the looming recession, what that's doing to that age group. And you can see how they're behaving. You can see in the behavior, you could see it also, in their lack of confidence, the, smoking of drugs. A lot of black families are concentrated in London, and we hear a lot about knife crime, we hear about homelessness, you hear about bad behavior of young people, you hear about drug addiction, you hear about mental health illnesses, because research such as this is very revealing that young people between 16 and 25 literally have lost hope in the UK. So those of us who are Africans and black people raising young people in this country need to be aware that nearly half, 50%, okay, of that age group are affected. They don't feel confident. Why don't they feel confident is a question, okay? So further, the research also states that the data that is covering wealth and equality in Great Britain between 2018 and 2020 revealed that adults identifying as black African had an average of only 80,000 pounds less wealth than white British adults. The wealth divide between Africans, black Africans and whites is 80,000 pounds. All right. And the wealth divide between Caribbeans and whites is 50,000 pounds, according to this research. And the wealth divide between Pakistani people is 111,000 pounds. And this is based on formal employment, which is a person's financial, pension, physical and property wealth. But it does exclude the business assets. If you include the business assets, I guess this figure will come down. Okay, if you compare, because the Pakistani and the Indians, for example, they own businesses. Yeah, so you can probably see a difference there. According to Office of National Statistics, Okay, if you even if you adjust for factors such as economic activity status, educational attainment, household makeup, and socioeconomic status, that's the figures that you find, that we are £80,000 less wealthy than white people. However, if you just go just by age and sex alone, those figures even become worse. They go like crazy, you know? It says that when the data only considers age and sex, the wealth divide appears even bigger. The wealth divide gets up to £165,000. So basically, every black African in the UK, almost every black African in the UK, okay, on average, is almost £200,000 less wealthy than their white counterparts. So can you imagine what that does for us as black adults, as black people, as black families in the UK? You know, that does a lot. For the Caribbean, it's 138,000. It's very, very high anyway. So data also revealed that, obviously, as we could imagine, that women were found to be £93,000 worse off than men, and someone living with a disability, 67,000 less wealth. Okay, and disability includes mental health and physical health as well, as you know. Some disabilities are seen and some are not seen. All right. So sorry about that car that parked behind there, because what that means is that we actually blocked off the beautiful view behind. Let me see if I can yeah, unfortunately, I'm so sorry about that, because I thought I had a really nice view right there behind me. But don't worry about it, yeah? What's interesting... So what's interesting is that Labour government blames the Tories, who have been in power for the last 13 years, for this situation, okay? And they're saying that Labour is warning that the cost of living crisis is disproportionately affecting low-income households, which spend a larger share of our income on food and fuel. Are you guys finding that you're spending, as black Africans in the UK, are you finding that you're spending a lion's share of your income on food and fuel? This is the reason. The reason is because you do not have any extra money to purchase clothing, because you need to get to work. Yeah, you need to buy food and you need to fuel your car. So you probably end up shopping secondhand. And if you don't shop secondhand, okay, or your clothing, your cupboard is limited to what you were able to purchase a while back, perhaps, you know. Because like I said in my earlier videos, a lot of black people don't like to shop secondhand for many reasons. One of them is spiritual, and the other one is just like beliefs about what that means, you know, shopping secondhand. Okay, the Runnymede Trust. There's research that was conducted by the Runnymede Trust, a race equality think tank, okay, which found that people from black and minority ethnic communities were disproportionately falling faster and further below the poverty line amidst the cost of living crisis. It found that people from black and minority communities were 2.5 times more likely to be in relative poverty than their white counterparts. What does that mean, basically? 2.5 times more, okay? 2.5 times more likely are we as black people to be in relative poverty than our white people. And that's the reason why, you know, we kind of like, sometimes you'll find black people are hanging their heads down in shame because of such things. Yeah. I want to change my environment a little bit for you guys. So let me move the car and see whether I can get at least a nice view, because I'm all about views as well. Okay. Hope you like that background, guys. I changed the background a little bit. I came to a quieter place because I really need, you know, to talk to you without distractions of, you know, background stuff. So anyway, yeah, thank you so much, by the way, for those of you who have tuned in. You're very welcome. This is African Queen Mo channel in Cardiff, and today we have a sensitive topic, which is about, you know, the economic crisis and how it's affecting black and African families here in the UK. I hope you're going to learn something from the research that I've actually conducted myself briefly. I am an evaluator, by the way, as a professional, and a friend of mine actually said, could you please give us some information that will help us grow? And I said, I can't help you grow. Are you kidding? I realized, actually, yes, I can. Yeah. I do have some research skills that might be of help, and some evaluation skills. So listen, guys, basically what I'm trying to tell you is that a lot of people from minority and ethnic communities are heavily overrepresented amongst the lowest income groups in the UK. And this is quite shameful, by the way. This is quite sad because a lot of Africans who come here, if you ask Africans, why did you come to the UK? It's to improve their livelihoods and to improve prospects for their families back home. When you look at, the rate of, forex, remittances back in Africa, it's really high. A lot of black people are working very, very hard to try to sustain their families back in their own countries. All right. And it takes a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of people are not living very comfortable lives here in the UK and abroad because they have this burden of responsibility. So it's unfortunate if black people really cannot find proper jobs. But anyway, this is the view of the Labour. The Labour has pledged, the Labour government, in the UK we have the Labour and also the Tory government. At the moment we have the Tories who have been in power for 14 years, I think, plus. And then the Labour government have pledged to tackle structural racial inequalities through introduction of a new Race Equality Act. They will introduce mandatory ethnic pay gap reporting for firms with more than 250 staff. So we have pay gaps, okay, between people of different races in the UK, and there will be mandatory reporting, according to Labour government, of any company that has over 250 plus employees. And I wonder what kind of companies those would be. Most likely those where the Africans are highly represented is mostly in healthcare and security and those kinds of jobs. Lower cadre jobs, although we do also have some professionals in the healthcare field, such as doctors and nurses, who are higher up. But apparently it looks like perhaps some of their pay grades or some of their actual pay could be less than their white counterparts, which is quite unfortunate, isn't it? Meanwhile, a government spokesman from the Tory government said that, of course, they will have to provide a rejoinder on this issue. And according to them, the ethnic minority employment is at a record high, which is a testament to the government's commitment to equality and opportunity for all. We also have delivered £1,200 of direct help to those most in need in the financial year, including £400 towards energy bills and an additional £1 billion across the country to help with the cost of household essentials. Well, I must admit that a lot of black people in this country are on benefits. Basically, they have qualified, to get, support for their children and for household bills and things like that. But on the other hand, I think a lot of Africans and black people don't necessarily want to only rely on benefits. A lot of people want the opportunity to work and provide for their families without necessarily having the government provide these benefits to them. Because as much as the government provides benefits, it also provides a lot. Those benefits comes a lot of oversight and intrusion by the government on your private life as a citizen or as a person in the country. But you see, if you're not on benefits, then you no longer have to report to the government. So basically, it provides an opportunity for the government to also monitor you too closely. And that's another big disadvantage of this kind of approach to poverty eradication or poverty alleviation by the Tory government. Looks to me like I'm actually surrounded by so many black people who have come to park in this little corner. And I'm wondering to myself, what is going on? I would just love to show you, but I won't do that, Basically for their own privacy. But it looks like black people are actually looking for corners where they can just go. People drive their cars and they look for a little corner where they can go and meet their friend. So when I came in here, there was a car that was parked across the road, and there's two black people in it. And then on this other side also, there's two cars that just parked, either side. There's a black guy, black lady, who've just met on this corner. And there's like nobody on this side of the parking lot. I'm actually at the leisure center where people come over to do sports and things like that. But anyway, at the moment, let's continue with this research. It's quite interesting, by the way. I was really intrigued by it. So basically, the Tory government is citing what they call our groundbreaking inclusive Britain action plan, set out how we would build a fairer and more inclusive society with actions across education, health, employment, criminal justice, and family support. Well, they need to tell us about this inclusive Britain action plan thing, because it looks to me like they're delaying on these results. and they need to tell us about it. Somebody needs to go and track and see to what extent that is being achieved. And I'm ready. Here I am. I'm ready to be in that team that is going to go and evaluate or monitor, the implementation of this inclusive British action plan. Now, the second issue, the first issue that we have discussed there is the issue to do with the cost of living and the wealth race divide. The cost of living and the wealth race divide. So you can see how the cost of living will impact negatively on black families in the UK because of the wealth race divide. The second issue that is of great concern to black families is insecure jobs, insecure work due to structural racism. Okay, so the data on insecure work in the UK, basically says that the number of black and minority ethnic workers, BME they call it, in low paid and insecure jobs doubled in the last decade, the figures reveal. So the number of black and minority ethnic workers in insecure work, doubled from 360,200 jobs to 836,000 between 2011 and 2022. In a decade, we have more than doubled from 360,000 to 836,000. Guys, why is it, that the number of black and minority ethnic workers in insecure work has doubled to that extent? That research was actually published by the Trades Union Congress, and it showed that the proportion of black minority ethnic workers in low-paid secure work increased from 12.2% of the population, which is already significant. Anything over 10% of the population is significant. So that 360,000 represented 12% of the population to 17% of the population. What is the definition of insecure work, by the way? So insecure work is that you have limited rights and protections. You have limited work and protections, and basically you're treated as disposable labor because you're mostly casual. The term insecure work basically covers people who are on low pay, on variable hours, such as 0-hour contracts, for doing seasonal or agency work. So those many black people, black African people here in the country are doing agency work. Actually, many of my friends are working with agencies. And the reason why many people work for agencies is because it's difficult for many Africans to get jobs. You see, when many people go for interviews, there's a big problem with interviewing. And I'm going to discuss that in a minute, about how the interviews self-select out the black people, and how interviewing strategies and the interview regime, I can call it an interview regime in this country, has ensured that black people are basically, removed even before they're selected. They're like different levels, There's the interview itself, during which racism can occur. And then there's also during application process, and there's also submission of CVs and applications, and what they look at the CVs, and when you go for interviews, and then also when you get to the work itself, how your boss themselves can implement racist attitudes and practices on blacks, and how that impacts on ability to retain black workers and for black workers to feel comfortable in these jobs. So the Trades Union Congress General Secretary, Paul Nowak, described the findings as structural racism in action. Structural racism in action. This is Paul Nowak. And he added that no matter your background, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect at work. But too many black and ethnic minority workers are trapped in low-paid, insecure jobs with limited rights and protections and treated like disposable labor. Guys, tell me something. When you are working in your jobs, do you feel disposable? Do you feel that you're not as valued as your white counterparts as a black employee? Do you feel that way? Well, I'll tell you a little story about myself. I have actually had 2 professional jobs in this country of the UK. Actually, both of them I was headhunted, when I was back in Kenya, where I was holding, and should I say, consultancy work and positions, working at a high level with the respected organizations, international organizations. I have almost 20 years, under my belt of experience. I've traveled the world, literally. As you can see, I can express myself clearly in English. And I'm not shy, to come on board, and I'm actually usually quite comfortable in public, and provided the podium many times to present my findings on research. I'm quite thorough. I've written more than 100, almost 200 evaluation reports. But when I go for each of the jobs for which I was hired in the UK, I always felt like I had second thoughts about myself. For the first time, I was never as confident as I was when I was back in Africa working with the same international community. I kept second guessing myself. Got to the point where people would give you this look. You know, they give you this look. Does she really know what she's saying? What is she saying? Do you even understand what she's saying? They will not give you the time of day. And I actually blame the media, because what do they show? They just show starving Africans, starving children. Oh, please donate to Water Aid. Oh, donate, these people need money. Yes, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Africans do not need support and do not need help. I, for once, have been working for beneficiary communities, children, weighing them. Okay, I can tell you there's a high level of malnutrition in many African cities and in many African villages and places where rural populations live. There's a very high level of malnutrition amongst children and amongst mothers. Anywhere where they do not own land, okay, where there are squatter settlements especially, and where they own their own land and they do not have the rights to make decisions, as women, for example. A lot of the times, the gender issue in Africa, where men make many decisions and women, many of the times who are responsible for the household, are not left enough money or do not have access to resources or even access to the land title deed where they can go to the bank and maybe get a loan, maybe to buy a cow and that can produce milk, and she can take the milk to market and sell it, etc. So, or even to buy a bicycle, or even to buy a car or a pickup for her household because the man is holding the title deed. In a lot of the rural parts of Africa, that is a fact of life. And even the urban poor, okay, the urban squatter settlements in Africa, and the biggest one being in our country, Kibera, yes, we have seen a lot of poverty there. I am not interested in denying that. It's a fact, okay? But when that is all that the media shows and projects about Africa, then it becomes an issue. Because very well here in the UK as well, you have seen on YouTube, a lot of children are living in poverty in the UK. Here where I live in Wales, childhood poverty is not even disputed, not at all. Okay, childhood poverty is a reality here in Wales. By the way, I'm going to move the car a little bit forward because I think I'm losing. Let me get a little bit into the light. I feel like I'm losing the light because, yeah, let me move a bit forward. Yeah, I think that's a bit better, right, guys? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of childhood poverty here in Wales, and they don't dispute it, and it's one of the poorest places in the UK, Wales, okay, unfortunately. So there is poverty here as well, but that is not all you hear about in the UK. When you look at the international media, they don't talk about the poverty in Wales. They don't talk about the poverty in the UK, like on CNN, on BBC. Rarely do they show poverty. They show poverty in India and in Africa. So basically, a lot of black people are in insecure work, okay, on low pay, on variable hours, on zero contracts. And the Trade Union Congress has stated that the UK is becoming a nation of insecure jobs, where people are all working on agency jobs. In fact, when you go into the classifieds, let's say you go to all of these like the Indeed, or you go to all these platforms where they advertise jobs, you'll be shocked. So many of the jobs are lower cadre jobs. Yeah, cleaners, caretakers. Look, I'm not going to look down on them because I'm a cleaner myself, as you know. I have a job here as a cleaner. I have a business where I run here as a cleaner. In addition to my evaluation professionalism, I also do cleaning. Why? Because those jobs are what are available and what will pay in this country. So I'm one of those who are in the insecure job market, where I do not have a salary at the end of the month, where I am not on any pension, okay, where I could easily lose my job and be treated as disposable labor. Okay, so it just depends on how I handle my clients and whether my clients are able to afford my services and if I'm able to do a good job, okay? Yeah, so basically there are 3.9 million people in such employment in the UK. That's a huge amount of people. The UK population, by the way, is about 60 million people. And of those, 3.9 million people, hey, that's about 5% of the population are in insecure work. Yeah. So it said in 2011, in 2011, this is how it is. this is how it's grown in the last decade. In 2011, like over 10 years ago, only 1 in 8 low-paid jobs were insecure jobs. But by the end of 2022, that proportion had increased to 1 in 5. 1 in 5. And I bet you in 2023 now, it's probably much higher. Much, much higher. We also have the problem of underreporting, and things like that. So I looked at some of the figures and I found that actually the percentage of usual residents who are 16 years and over, okay, by being economically inactive by country of birth. Those people who are what you call economically inactive. When we say economically inactive, it means that they are working in the gig economy, they are in insecure jobs. It's not that you're not active, but basically the economy is not registering you as active because your jobs are not, they're not regular jobs, okay? They're insecure jobs, basically. They're casual jobs, you can be disposed of, etc. So, by country of birth, according to the census of 2021, the percentage of usual residents aged 16 years and over by reason for being economically inactive by country of birth, Africa is 10% say it's because they're retired, 6% say it's because they're students, 3.2% say that it's because they're long-term sick or disabled, and 6.9%, which is about 7%, is because they're looking after family. Okay, that's the reason why they're economically inactive. So guys, this is a heavy topic, yeah, and it seems like it's getting a bit too long, unfortunately, but I think it's important for you to hear the statistics, just the last few minutes, if you can give me your ear just for a couple more minutes so that we can cover this topic nicely, and then now we can start talking without the research, without all these papers that I have in front of me. Now that we know the facts, then we'll be able to talk from a point of knowledge. So in terms of employment, those people who are 16 and above, okay, usual residents of the UK, Africans compared to others. So the people who are, least employed in this country are British Overseas Territories, who are about 45%, okay, are employed. And the Middle East and Asia, which is about 60%. Africa as well, about 61%, 60.9%. So how do black Africans compare in terms of employment rates in the UK compared to, for example, people from the EU and people from the UK, So, for example, the UK, believe me, has one of the least levels of employment in this UK country. 55%, which is like about half the population, just slightly over half the population, are in employment, are employed, that is, okay? Compared to Africans, who are about 60.9%. So we're doing better than the UK residents in this country. So Africans, people from Africa, black Africans here, we are employed at a higher rate than UK residents. And the EU, of course, takes the cake with about 80% of people employed, okay, in this country. And now the question is, why? Why? Okay, let's also now look at those ones who are unemployed, okay? Unfortunately, as you can imagine, okay, about 9%, 8.7%, which is about 9% of Africans are unemployed, as compared to 4% of Europeans who are unemployed, and of the British, only 3.1% consider themselves unemployed. It's a bit confusing, isn't it, that we say that 61% of Africans are employed, are in employment, compared to 55% of the UK residents, but of those who report themselves to be unemployed, it's only 3% of the UK residents, and about 9% of Africans, and only about 4% of Europeans. So basically our unemployment rate, or for those of us reporting to be unemployed, we are double the number of Europeans who are unemployed in this country, and more than double the numbers of those who report themselves as unemployed British. That means that there are British citizens here who report themselves unemployed for various reasons. Maybe some of them are retired, some of them may decide not to be employed, some of them is because they are looking after children, or maybe because they can't be employed, or because they don't want to be employed. But for Africans who want to be employed, for those of us who are unemployed, reporting ourselves as unemployed, we are about almost 10%, okay, of the unemployed population. Yeah. So now the question is why? Why? And this is the question I was asking myself. Why? Obviously, seriously, why? And basically, the reason why black people are unemployed, and I was looking at things to do with like interviewing and things like that. That's going to be for another video. I'm going to talk about that in a different video. Okay? Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a different video, because majority of Africans who are employed, nearly half, 47.5% of specialist medical practitioners, doctors with a specialism, for example, oncologists, cardiologists in England and Wales, were born outside of the UK. Okay? So nearly half, like almost 50% of those people, specialists, those guys are earning a lot of money. People like doctors and cardiologists, oncologists. Yeah, and oncologists is people who work in cancer research or, you know, cancer treatment. Cardiologists, people who work in heart. These are people who are doctors, you know, who are specialized doctors. Most of them were born outside of England and Wales. The largest group of non-UK born specialist practitioners came from the Middle East and Asia, 26%, and followed by Africa, 8.5%. So as much as we have people reporting to be unemployed who are black and African, there are at least 8.5% of the specialists from Africa. That means that Africans are very highly educated. Let's look at nursing professionals. 1 in 4 in mental health nurses were born outside of the UK, and those born in Africa made up the largest part of this group. 20% of all mental health nurses come from Africa. Okay, and come from Africa. 20% of all mental health nurses in the UK come from Africa, and that's a very big group, because that's a very big percentage considering the proportion of blacks in this country who are much lower. Okay, midwifery nurses had one of the smallest non-UK workforce. So most of the UK workforce are in midwifery. That is when you give birth here. You know, people say, they want to come and give birth in the UK. Majority of the nurses that you'll find here are not going to be from Africa. Most of them are going to be UK born. Okay? Very interesting statistics, by the way. I learned a lot. And something that I also learned that was very, very interesting was that literally all farmers in this country, 97%, are UK. They are white UK people here. Okay? Farming. Apart from this one Zimbabwean farmer, and that was quite an interesting thing. So the question is, so with this wealth race divide that we are experiencing here, with this cost of living that we have, and we have a wealth race divide, on top of that, we have a problem with our jobs, okay, which are insecure jobs, okay? We have the wealth race divide, we also have insecure jobs to deal with and to contend with. And the reason is because of structural racism, okay, as was stated by the trade union representative. Yeah, and also Labour has also admitted this, although the government spokesman will talk about the gains that they have made, you know the good things that they have done, okay, for the black and minority ethnic group. But the fact is that we as Africans, let's tie this up, we as Africans here, black Africans, when we do our YouTube videos, can we talk a little bit also about our experiences in trying to find work? As much as we say, oh, come from Africa, come from Nigeria, come from Kenya, come from Ghana, there are many jobs, there are many nursing jobs. Yes, definitely. If you're a mental health nurse, you will definitely do well in this country, because 20% of nurses in this country are already from Africa. Yeah? Most black people are actually working as carers and nurses in this country. Fewer are working as cleaners. Majority of them are working in the nursing profession and caring profession, for example. So yes, there are a lot of opportunities for blacks. But why is it that it's only restricted to those fields? What about IT? What about engineering? What about medicine? Yes, okay, in medicine. If you're a specialized medical professional, you will find 10% of you are here. But also, I've also seen some research that states that there is structural racism in like every area, even in those, hospitals, even in, the medical care, even the nursing care, in all those sectors, racism rears its ugly head, both from patients and also from employers. Yeah. And this is why I want to call attention to the British government to say, as a British citizen born in this country, okay, with lots of skills, I want to plead with the British government to look into this situation and to ensure that there is equality of pay for black workers, African workers, that they do their best to find a way to integrate black workers into organizations and make them feel comfortable, because some of the research also suggests that many people just basically don't apply. You know what I mean? Some people just self-eliminate themselves. So you decide, I'm not going to even apply for that job because most likely I'm not even going to get it anyway. Okay? So most of us have learned as black Africans, the easiest way to get jobs is through people that we know, through agencies that provide insecure work, okay? But not through long-term employers. So we do not approach long-term employers for employment because we know the answer. We know the answer in advance, and it's not a good one. Yeah. Some of my research also suggests that there is, we'll talk about that in a follow-up video about why and how this racism is actually practiced in reality on the ground. And I think this is going to be the follow-up video, how they do it and how we have managed to to kind of like, as a way to kind of like to avoid feeling demoralized and losing our confidence. There's a way that we have also learned how to apply for jobs. And if you're looking for Africans who are qualified, black people, Africans, let's say you're a human resource person yourself, and you're really keen to make sure that you have equal representation and fair representation of blacks in your company, then you need to know where and how to advertise and how to recruit and how to attract black Africans. It's not enough to say that we are an equal opportunity employer. That doesn't work. I'm sorry. That's too cliche for us. Yeah. You need to actually demonstrate it and show us, that you show us through your pay grades, show us through the workers that you have in office, show us through your management to show that you have representation within your management of people of color. Yeah, and show us the diverse types of activities that take place in your offices. So it's not just when, at the end of the day, everybody gets up and rounds up and goes to the pub. What happens to the Muslim who doesn't want to go to the pub? What happens to the African who perhaps is religious and or has children at home? Not just that, one group dominates. Perhaps maybe you can have like events, maybe you can just allow people just to go back home and don't be suspicious. Don't feel that because they didn't come with you to the pub that they're being antisocial. That's not necessarily true. Just maybe go out for lunch with somebody and just have lunch together. And I know that we Africans and blacks sometimes tend to follow the crowd just to please everybody else. We want to be people pleasers. And in the end, we hurt ourselves because we know very well we don't fit. In the end, you might want to be open, but you might find that you're being isolated anyway by your co-workers. And in that case, if you're being isolated by your co-workers, it might feel better and more relaxing to go for a walk by yourself. And at that point, then you may be considered antisocial, and that's not fair. I think, workplaces are not conducive for many people of color. And so the government needs to look into this, and private organizations and private corporations need to look into the unfair treatment of black workers and unfair treatment of CVs of black workers and application processes that blacks have to undergo. The pain of rejections, getting rejections, going for interviews and not even knowing what the outcome is and not even getting a response to that. But to be fair, I've also met a lot of white applicants who have told me the same thing, that they've applied for so many jobs, and you'll even see it online, that a lot of white British applicants and even, European applicants, they apply for jobs, but unfortunately, they don't even get a response. They even go for interviews. They don't even get a response. They don't even know why they did not even get the job. They can't even explain it to you. Many black people cannot even explain to you why it is that they got a regret letter or they didn't even hear back from an employer. That has happened to me one time in this country, where I got selected all the way up, to interviewing, to shortlisting, to interviewing, and to the second interview. And after that, I didn't even hear. And yet the whole interview process looked so positive. And I was really feeling positive about it and thinking that I was going to get the job. But did I get the job? No. And did they explain? No. Did they even come back to you? No. So you're left guessing. Why? Why did they not select you? Is it that they feel that it's going to be too much work to keep you on board? Is it that, maybe they feel intimidated by your qualifications? There's a time I rode in a taxi with a Pakistani in England, when I was in England. And he's a human resource and finance graduate. And he was extremely depressed. And he was saying that the only reason he drives a taxi is because of his wife. Because he was so depressed that his wife said, look, you need to do something with yourself. Because he kept applying for so many jobs and was always disqualified as being overqualified, which is literally an insult to our education. How do you say that we are overqualified? Why? By what criteria do you say we're overqualified? That's not fair at all, because that's denying your country people who are well qualified for the job, who could make a big positive difference to the company, unless you don't actually want to see change, unless you're comfortable with the status quo. So let's reflect and look at these things. As like I was saying, African YouTubers, okay, we need to be very dead honest about this issue, because I've also seen how, when we Africans are not able to secure work, or when the only jobs that we can apply for are those at a lower cadre for us, some people are not able to do that. Some people are not able to apply for those carer jobs because, first of all, they're not actually comfortable working as carers. You have to have a kind of demeanor to work as a carer, really, or even as a teacher or anything like that. So if you are not a cleaner, you are not a doctor by profession, and you are a professional and you're qualified for jobs, it can be very, very difficult to accept to work jobs that are lower cadre than what you're qualified for. So all I can say is, we should have a little bit more empathy towards people who are finding it difficult to find work, and understand that this is not their fault, that this is a structural issue, and it needs to be looked at by the government, and they need to put the money where their mouths are. Otherwise, they'll continue to feed Africans who are qualified, okay, through benefits, and continue to have people who are out of work or reporting as unemployed, okay? And they didn't even talk about those who report as underemployed, because there are many people who are underemployed. Either they don't get enough hours, or they're working in jobs that do not suit their qualifications. Okay, so anyway, I've had a good time chatting with you guys. Let me have your views about, how your experience has been seeking work in the UK. Some of you guys who have come in recently from Africa also have experiences that you can share with us. And those of you who have been here for a long time, how have you managed to get jobs? And I'm really not ready to hear from people who are just not empathetic, who will just say, oh, come on, get over it. No, that's not good enough. I've explained to you, and I've actually proven to you that this is a scientifically proven fact, that there is structural racism that is stopping black people from accessing jobs. Maybe you are one of the lucky few who are in that 8.9% who are actually employed, okay? And good for you. What about for those of you who are reporting as economically inactive? Maybe you do one gig here, maybe you create a website there for someone, maybe you do financial audits for someone, maybe you do a big taxation here for someone, maybe you give advice to someone, maybe you even are a cleaner, but you're not registered, you're not paying taxes, so you're not known to the government. So what about people like that, what about them? Okay, guys? So thank you so much for the rest of you for listening to me. I hope this has been an interesting discussion. So when it comes to the cost of living crisis, when you see us moaning about paying our rents and paying our bills and buying groceries and all that, you understand. Most likely it's because, yes, they're black, and yes, they're underemployed, or they are economically inactive. Yeah. And for what reason, we don't know. And yet, what is really sad, what is really, really sad, is that there are 2.1 million job vacancies in this country. 2.1 million vacancies. And we have people who are reporting as economically inactive in this country. How? And unemployed. How is that possible? How can Africans be the most unemployed and yet at the same time also be the highest, one of the highest employed in, for example, mental health in specialized professions? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah. So we need to look into that and employ the people who are already in the country first before trying to attract labor from outside. Okay, for Africans, for Black Africans. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Thank you, and please subscribe, share, and like this video. Bye-bye. It's been a pleasure. I wanna wake up with you in the morning. Show me there's nothing fake to me.